variances. But there's a lot of sameness about these. I mean, there's 13 different variances, I think, to go through each one of the 13 of them. And, you know, it was going to be very, very challenging to go through each and every one of them.
So my issue really is if you put them together, if it's going to be the same vote, you know, for all of them, like if there's a difference between D, E, and F, or even C for that matter, it gives us like the same request. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, if through discussion it's clear that everybody's in favor of it, I'm fine with that. But I mean, like, if I'm just using an example. Just for a different intersection, it's the same analysis. I'm probably okay with that. Got it. All right, cool, thanks.
I'm going to call this meeting of the Design Adjustment Committee to order. Before we begin, I have to read an introduction. The Design Adjustment Committee's purpose is to establish clear and measurable review criteria for the consideration of major deviations from the city's technical standards and specifications manual. The Design Adjustment Committee does not consider the housing type, cost of the proposed unit, occupants, building material, unit size, number of bedrooms, or the architectural design of the structures. These hearings are quasi-judicial evidentiary hearings. That means it's like a court hearing, and the committee's decisions are constrained by the standards in the ordinance and based on the facts presented. All variance requests require a 4/5 vote of the committee to grant the variance. Appeals of the Design Adjustment Committee are to the Board of Adjustment. A written notice of appeal must be filed with the city clerk within 30 days of the Design Adjustment Committee's decision. Appeals are set for a hearing before the Board of Adjustment within 30 days or as soon thereafter as practicable. The parties to these cases are entitled to an impartial board. If a board member has a fixed opinion on the matter, a financial interest in the outcome, a close relationship with the affected person, or has had any ex parte communication about the matter, please disclose that information to determine if a recusal is necessary. City staff will introduce the proposed project to the committee, and the committee members may ask questions. The applicant may present additional information about the project, and the members may ask questions. If anyone wishes to provide evidence at today's hearing, witnesses must sign in on the clipboard and be sworn in. Because witnesses are to provide sworn testimony, please focus on the facts and the standards, not personal preference or opinion. When a witness comes forward to give testimony, please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and speak clearly. At this time, staff will administer oath to all individuals who intend to provide witness testimony.
If I could have all staff, applicants, and members of the public who wish to speak to please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Okay, this is a special meeting of the committee, so there's no other business items, and we will jump right into agenda item number 1 for the avenue. The staff has a presentation.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. The item on your agenda today is for 349 Military Cutoff Road. This is a preliminary plan. They're seeking preliminary plan approval and design adjustments for a large-scale mixed-use development, which will include the construction of private streets and utility extensions. The site includes approximately 44.5 acres of land and is currently zoned UMX CD, which is an urban mixed-use conditional district. The existing conditional district includes 525 apartment units, 247-room hotel, 131,000 square feet of office space, 115,000 square feet of retail, and 16,000 square feet of restaurant space. The project requires a number of road improvements to the adjacent network, including but not limited to a new traffic signal and median break on Military Cutoff Road, a new travel lane and turn lanes on Military Cutoff Road, and a new 3-lane cross-section on Station Road at the eastern approach to Military Cutoff Road. A driveway connection is also being provided to the south to Old Macomber Station Road. The site has access to water and sewer mains located along Military Cutoff and along the rear of the site. The applicant is requesting a number of waivers, and I'll go through these. There's more detail for these waivers in your report, but they include a reduction in the minimum offset between intersections on the same side of the street and on opposite side of the street. Relief from the 10-foot non-municipal easements along proposed rights-of-way within the project. Allow for a non-standard right-of-way width on Street A, allow for a non-standard street cross-section on Street B. They would be requesting a reduction in the median tangent length between horizontal curves, a reduction in the minimum standard centerline curve radii for local streets, a reduction in the minimum width of a median on a collector street. They would like for an allowance for a non-standard street cross-section on Street C, allowance for a non-standard cul-de-sac bulb and drop-off area on Street C, and then non-standard street cross-sections for Streets D and E, and a non-standard cross-section for Alley F. That's all staff has prepared right now. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them, and the applicant is available for questions as well.
Brian,
I will point out that on the preliminary plan, the applicant has kind of got some little call-outs to where these variances will be applied.
Yeah, I saw that. I have a couple of questions for you. I know across the street at Mayfair, they have a mix of platted streets and then just streets that aren't platted that are just part of the property. They're not, so obviously they wouldn't be subject to the same standards as a platted street. Is there a reason why, I mean, it seems like this is really right-of-way heavy on this particular project. Are they all required to be right-of-ways, or can this just be part of the public property?
The code requires some connection, some frontage on right-of-way based on the number of units being proposed.
Okay.
Mayfair is a different kind of animal because it's an MX district, which has specific rules that cater to just MX developments only. They don't apply outside of that district.
Okay. Fair enough. And then I guess one clarification, Road C, adjacent to buildings 1A and 1B, where it makes that kind of hard 90, right up there by, on the north side of Road A. Is that drop-off area within the right-of-way, or is that like a driveway?
That is it's in the right-of-way, and that's one of the adjustments for the cul-de-sac / bulb drop-off area, which would be number 10.
Okay. Okay. That's all I had for Brian. Any other questions for Brian? Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Does the applicant wish to speak?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Rob Allen. I'm with Paramount Engineering, and we prepared the plans for this development. We're obviously here to answer any questions. We've provided our responses to these variance requests and some justification that we believe will help make that decision. And again, a map that kind of shows where each of these are. Some of them that we're requesting are kind of throughout the site in terms of like non-municipal easements, so we didn't point an arrow to the entire site showing you that, but some of these are applying everywhere, so we don't have all the numbers on there. But the ones that are specific, we tried to point out for you so you can see exactly where we're requesting those variances. That's all I have now. Unless you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them for you.
I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussion, and we'll probably have some questions for you along the way. Does anybody have anything for Rob?
Hey, Rob, just to make clear, what's called out on the screen, is that just one example of that variance where there are multiple instances of each of those variances?
Yeah, in the variance request, we defined in there where they happen and if they were multiple occurrences. If there's multiple occurrences, we tried to point those out. It's really just the ones that are kind of blanket because there was, instead of going through and putting it everywhere, we just requested a blanket variance on that.
And one more question. If your average city block length is around 300 feet, what is the dimension, like going from north to south between? So you've got basically the two streets running, let's say, around Building 2 and then 4 to the bottom of it. Like, so you have a thin built strip. What's that block length?
It's approximately, it's in the 175, 200-foot range is where we're running.
So as I'm looking at this plan going like up to down, we're talking about like, so Building 2 has a length and a width, right?
Yep.
That short edge is 175 feet?
Yep.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
I guess I have a question related to that, and I'm not really sure the best way to answer it, but it's, I guess, kind of regarding the front of house, back of house of these streets, since you're going to have public streets, or private streets, sort of on both sides of these buildings. How do you envision loading and unloading? Are you going to, I mean, I know that this is a lot of times going to be dealt with at the TRC level, the true technical review, but it is something that's come up recently on projects where these loading zones are sort of
I understand.
difficult. I was wondering if you
understand.
could speak to that.
So the project, as it's called, the Avenue, has a main street, what you see going from Military to the back of the site to that cul-de-sac at the very end.
Okay.
That's the main pedestrian experience. That's where folks are going to walk. That's the frontage of all the stores. So those areas are going to be off limits for any, deliveries, anything of that sort. So back of house really becomes, what we were just kind of talking about on that Road C and Road D on the opposite, on the backside of 4. Those are really back-of-house issues. That's where we're going to have meters. That's where we're going to have, trucks drop-off deliveries, UPS deliveries, things of that nature. Not that pedestrians are prohibited back there. It's just, like we said, the kind of the back-of-house is the way we perceive that to be. And kind of the same with that Road C, really, that goes between Building 5 and Building 6. We have to have an area kind of for people to be dropped off in those areas, to kind of get deliveries in those areas. That's kind of what set up that the other variance requests behind Building 1A and 1B, that delivery bump out, because we realize that Road C in and of itself is very narrow with a few on-street parking. We don't want that road clogged up, so we're trying to designate that delivery area, if you will, and drop-off area, to keep it from happening on the street.
Is there a reason that, and I guess we're going to have a time where we're going to kind of dig into some of these variances specifically, but I guess my question for you is the same one I had for Brian. Is there a reason why that bump out between 1A and 1B couldn't function more as a driveway instead of it being within right-of-way?
Yeah, there's, to my knowledge, there's no right-of-way on that Road C, so it's really just a private access at that point is what our intentions are.
So the brow there?
Yeah,
or the
because
drop-
really the frontage we're getting to that building is on Military Cutoff, and then the other frontage is Road B, so in my opinion, Road C really acts as it does act as a driveway more or less, so.
Okay. So, for example, on Building 5, are you envisioning that, a truck would just stop in the middle of Road C? I mean, where would they go all the way down to the bump out by 1A and 1B?
Yeah, they'd be in the bump out by 1A and 1B, or, the other at the end of Building 12 up there in that parking lot area, we could
Oh, by the
unload
roundabout.
smaller trucks there too, yeah.
You're talking about by the roundabout,
Yeah.
okay. and perhaps maybe through the TRC, there's another loading area that could be identified
Yeah.
between 6 and 12. I don't know.
And a lot of this is like what happens downtown, a lot of the discussions we have, all these deliveries are going to be, 5, 6 a.m. in the morning, or, typically when there's not a lot of traffic out there is when most of the deliveries are going to occur.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I have a follow-up question about the dimensions kind of the block there. If I look at like Road A, the private right-of-way, that's 80 feet wide, it looks like. That looks about how wide Building 2 is. It doesn't look like it's 175 feet wide.
Yeah, the measurement that I provided to you was from center line to center line. That's how the code reads.
Gotcha.
That's
Thank
what
you.
it is.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I don't have the clear dimension of that Building 2 side width. I don't know what that is off the top of my head. But I do know from measuring and looking at those, I think it's about 175 center to center.
Yeah, it looks basically like the dimension of that building,
Yeah.
2, 4, 8, those are about 65 feet. Does that seem about fair? So between blocks, we have about 65 feet. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah, from front of building to back of building?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair to say.
Thank you.
Maybe a little bit more, but it's close.
And just looking at the entire site plan, is the overall intent for all outside vehicles entering to park in the structures? I mean, I see on-street parking available, there's not much of it.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's 2 parking structures. Parking structure 1 at the south side of the page that you see. And then Building 6 has, that bottom left corner, you see parking structure number 2. There's a large parking facility in there. So that is the majority of spaces, pulling people into those areas. On the main avenue, there are on-street parking, but again, it's, the concept of this and what, we're being tasked with is it wants to be pedestrian friendly. We don't want a lot of cars on the roads. We want it to be more free moving for pedestrians, and that's the overall intent of this design, so.
Thank you. Again, I'm sure at some point we'll need you to come back up, but thank you. Okay, so I guess we got to kind of wrestle this. Yeah. Was there any discussion before we open the public hearing, or?
I'd like to, because from an urban design perspective, I'm going to back it out before we get to,
Yeah.
how far away this is from that and all this. I have big concerns about the roughly 70 or so foot kind of block length. I'm racking through my brain trying to think of other locations or other cities where I see that happening, and I just can't find it. I mean, normally, when you look at a street grid for a city, pick almost any city in the nation, they're roughly about the same size. I mean, you got Manhattan.
Chad, could you speak in your microphone?
Sure.
Thanks.
Sorry, thank you. Around most cities in the country, the blocks are relatively standardized. I mean, there's some variation to them, but generally they're around 300 feet. And so putting this much infrastructure around such a short block edge is kind of concerning for me. And so that might, I don't know how that lines up with distances between right-of-ways or any of the other things that we're talking about. But from an urban design perspective, I just haven't seen this done. Simply put, it's a lot of road in a very little space. So just start off with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how this, because of that, I mean, I didn't know how that obviously speaks to the sort of distance between center line variance that they're requesting, and I didn't know how that sort of narrow block length or short block length would affect traffic, overall circulation. I just don't know. You don't know what you don't know. I mean,
What it looks like to me is if there were something going on, people were going or coming home from work, there's an event going on, whatever, somebody's, you can fit, 3 cars in the block, basically. You've got, so if these areas had to become, and I suspect the reason the technical standards are as they are is to provide some sort of queuing space, refuge, safety, just some room for vehicles, and I don't know what that's going to look like there when we're only talking about once we get down to how much space the car can actually use when you're set back from, you know, the stop bar, maybe 3 cars, tops.
Yeah, I don't know. Good point. Any thoughts from a fire perspective and circulation?
Well, I know some of these issues have already been brought up in the technical. I'm dealing with you with the tightness of everything that's in there, especially during your high traffic, peak traffic hours like 5 p.m. early in the morning. You know, how much accessibility are we going to be able to get in there from a traffic standpoint if we've got to get into that location under emergency traffic and vehicles are backed up trying to get into that huge, tight, tight turn development? It's not as spread, it's just very, very compact in there, and it's going to be quite a challenge, to say the least, during high peak traffic times of how we're going to be able to get in there and maneuver. That's my thoughts on that because of how dense that whole area is, and these back areas that are accessing the rear of those buildings, typically we would not try to put ourselves in those positions from an apparatus standpoint because of the minimum of maneuverability that we would have there as it is. Those would be considered alleys. And as in several other discussions that we've had, not pertaining to this project, but we would not want to put ourselves in the position of being exposures. And those back areas through there would be probably off limits to us unless extreme circumstances would dictate that we would come back there. So it puts us back in the main areas, and then we have the traffic congestion that we have to concern ourselves with the density of the buildings and the amount of traffic that's potentially going to be there at certain times of the day especially.
When you say back areas, are you talking about like Road C that's on the north side of 2 and 8?
Yes, as referring to Road Cs and those areas, what I call them, they look like alleyways where you're going in between 2 buildings, or you've got, we may be able to get equipment through there, but the problem is we're in such close proximity to those structures that if we did have an incident, most likely all of our fire protection access to that buildings will be on the front of the buildings facing your main streets. We would not commit to the back behind those buildings because it lends itself to being an exposure to our equipment that we may, in the event of emergency, it would be very difficult to get out of there in a hurry for the most part. If that answers your question.
And just to kind of put a bow on that, I applaud the compact nature and the desire for walkability. I think that we're all fine, and behind that. For me, I guess I'm not seeing in the site anything that's precluding them from following the technical standards other than they just didn't, right? They proposed something different. And in my mind, I'm not certain as to the kind of proportions between the built form and the right-of-way proposed here and how successful that's going to be at achieving that.
Okay. Well, we can have additional discussion, after the public hearing, but I do have to get that open. So is there anyone here who wishes to speak on this matter? I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Okay. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Which leads us to, sort of continue this discussion and then eventually, continue, or, take some action on these waivers. I guess from a general perspective, I don't have a problem with variable right-of-way widths, simply because of on-street parking, potentially widened areas for landscaping. I think in general, roundabouts, those are normal. I'm not even 100% sure that really even should be a variance if that's the only reasoning. But there are obviously some issues that we do need to discuss. So there's a lot of this that I'm comfortable with, but there are a few aspects that I do think we need to discuss, that being one of them. I had some concerns about the loading and unloading zone. I don't know if anybody has picked up on the service area for the Westin Hotel and how much of that intersection is getting picked up. it's really, really tight through there. I'm not really sure how that's going to work. I'm not sure how that's consistent with code, but again, this is still got to go through the technical review committee, so I guess we kind of have to lean a lot on that. This is not necessarily a final approval for this project. It is going to have to go through the technical review committee, and some of these issues can get hashed out at that level. Where do we start?
Number one.
Start with number one. Good place. Which is the 400-foot between intersections, which is the block length issue that you're speaking to.
And it might be a question for Brian, though, regarding the applicant's justification, mentioning the UMX sites outside the 1945 block faces shall not exceed 400 feet. Is that a fair statement?
The UMX does call for a grid street. It does call for more compact development, and you've seen this in other UMX developments, particularly Centerpoint. It's a unique animal outside of the 45, and so you're looking at a kind of a mini downtown kind of setup. So it does call for a more tight kind of development pattern, typically because these sites are, you put a little mini downtown, you're going to have to tighten things up. So it's envisioned as part of the UMX district.
Is there any minimum block length that you're aware of?
I'd have to look in the code. I don't think so.
The minimum is 400 feet.
I mean, outside of the technical standards, I don't think the UMX goes into that level of specificity.
I mean, this is a big one, right? This is kind of defining the character of this, Brian, as you said, like a mini downtown. I guess I would just be curious to the applicant why that can't be met. Can they come up?
So just, I'm kind of going to address some of what I've heard in some of the previous talks here with the 400 feet offset. A lot of this too, when you look at it, again, we're working, we don't have a perfectly square box that we're working within. We have lots of environmental issues we're trying to work and squeeze in through. And if you just look at this, when you see if we put a 400-foot grid north to south, we would basically have a road through parking structure 1, and the second row would be somewhere in building 6. That's about how that would line up. It's just not the same beast as it is downtown. We can't look at a 400-foot block length and width and make that justifiable. I don't know how we would lay this out in any fashion that way with the environmental concerns, with the oddity of the property shape. Again, we're trying to fit all these blocks into the mix here and make them all fit, and this is the best fit we have. In terms of when you look, and I understand the concerns about queuing and the traffic's there, when you pull in these, and the question that was raised about parking is a good one because the majority of the parking is in parking structures. So the intent of this is you pull in, you park your car, you get out, and you have the walking experience. That's what we're looking for. Not pull up and is there a spot open in front of, store A, let me pull right in there. That's not the whole intent here. The intent is to get out of your car and walk. It gets you to see more stuff and get you to get outside a little bit more. What we're envisioning is when you come in Road A off a military cutoff and you make a right to go to parking structure 1, you're unobstructed. You got a free-flowing right turn, you go right in, you're in the parking garage. That's solved. When you come across, you make a left to go into parking structure number 2. We have designated left turn lane for that, so cars can get in and make that left. What we're proposing is when you come through, you're unobstructed. There's not a stop sign there. So that car making that left movement off of Road A can either make a left on Road C, can go straight into the parking garage, or can make a right on Road C. So that's unobstructed there, so there shouldn't be any queuing issues that I'm aware of. I don't believe this is going to be a parking structure, so I don't think we have to wait for people to pay, queuing that way. I think they pull in, you find your space, you move on. In terms of between buildings 2 and 8, as you proceed down Road A, If you choose not to go to one of those parking structures, again, that's the intent. We're assuming the majority of people are going to go off into these parking structures. But if you don't, and you come down, the other thing that we considered, and again, this is something we thought we would talk about in technical review committee, but I'm open to talk about it here if it helps. When you turn between buildings 2 and 8, really, in my opinion, that should be free-flowing north to south on Road B, and your stop movement should be on Road C. It's the smaller of the roads, and then Road A would be the only stop movement for Road B outside of Military and Old Macomber. However, I know it's come up in some of our conceptual TRC that, you know, there was some concern of cars flying down the road and going faster, and okay, so what do we do to stop that? You put stop signs. So, you know, it's kind of, you know, which one has the biggest benefit here? I think the block length is so short there that I think the benefit would be to remove stop signs on Road B at the intersection of Road C. I think that's very justifiable. Again, it's a short block length. This way we don't worry about queuing. You make a left, you go. There's no holding up traffic. If we hold up traffic behind buildings 2 and 8, that's technically the back of house service yard. We're not as concerned about that. Plus, there's plenty of block length there to have queuing. In terms of fire, what Mr. Captain said, you know, it's the same kind of scenario here where the intent is to get these cars off the road when you pull in. So I know everybody can envision this because we've seen it and we live here, but you pull into Mayfair, you come right up to an intersection immediately. You go left, you go right. There you can go straight also. It's kind of the same scenario here, except Envision pulling into Mayfair, and now your parking is either you make a left or you make a right, right? So you don't have all the other on-street parking that Mayfair has. That's the clear difference here. So I don't necessarily see, I understand rush hours, I understand peaks. People are still going to drive up and down the road, drop kids, pick kids up. I get all that. And all that is going to happen no matter where we are. But, you know, again, the intent of this project is to get cars away from Road A. That's the intent. And then these kind of back alleys, as I'll call them, or driveways or shorter roads, is like you said, that's where people are going to flow through. We're going to get, you know, coming out of parking garages or into it. Like, that's where we want people to funnel through, or cars to funnel through, not on the main roads. So, you know, if we can keep Road B and Road A free-flowing for the most part, except for one intersection, I think that kind of justifies the fact that you can get in and get around even during those rush hours. And that's kind of our intent here.
Thank you.
Sure.
So just to maybe clarify in my head what you just said, so if a vehicle enters from military cutoff from Road A, they would have unobstructed, no stop signs or anything until they get into the parking structures? I mean,
Yeah, so when you go in Road A, if you made a left, obviously you have to make a left against opposing traffic there. But outside of that, when you go straight in, our intent is going to be straight in, so you can go straight into the deck, left or right. So that movement has full flow. There's no obstructions to
flow,
it. Yeah. And then obviously park in structure 1, you have a free-flowing right. You can make that without waiting.
Okay.
And then and just to add this too, you know, where you come into the decks there, the exits are also, if you look at park in structure 1, you got a backside exit on Road B. So, you know, both of these decks have 2 access points. So, emergency services, if something happens in one, you can get in another, but a lot of the intent here too, this one has, I'm sorry, park in structure 2 has 3. So, you know, there's multiple ways to go in and out. If you're a resident living in the upstairs of this, if I lived there, I don't think I'd want to go out and fight traffic. You're going to find a path of least resistance and go out of it.
So I think to the concern, I mean, I think that, I'm Mike Nichols, landscape architect with Paramount Engineering. Sorry I didn't introduce myself. The intent, I think you recognize, is for this urban grid pedestrian form, which we appreciate as well. But the ordinance that I'm not going to use the word battling in a jokeful way, but in a way we sort of are, because the ordinance is designed for more of a traditional subdivision type of application. So all these that we're asking for are directly related to this UMX and trying to create that grid-like pattern. So to my point of the smaller block size, I would almost want you to think about Road C and Road D as alleys. I think it was mentioned that they basically are alleys by fire, and that you wouldn't serve them from the back. We call them roads because they have parking on them, but essentially they are the back of house. If that helps you, I guess, think about these roads, in air quotes, sort of differently, the buildings aren't serviced from the side. So, building 8 is the only one that has access to the sides. Building 2 you know, it's a front and back building. It's not a side and side building. It's not a downtown city block. And if you walk downtown city Wilmington, you're going to find alleys within 75 feet of intersections. It's just the nature of them, because the back of the building, I mean, buildings aren't 400 feet deep. They're not 150 feet deep in most cases. They're, you know, 60, 80 feet deep, so that light can get in from both the front and the back, and it's not dark and dead in the middle. I mean, that's just a standard by which architects design buildings. So these are just essentially standalone buildings that have a back alley. We happen to call them roads, and if that's a nomenclature issue, we can change them to alleys. But we do have parking on them, so we're trying to accommodate or assimilate to the code as best as possible, and fit this, you know, square project or round project into a square hole, you know what I mean? Because like I said at the beginning of this, the ordinance wasn't necessarily written for a UMX type project. But if you went to an old downtown, say downtown Wilmington even, you will see alleys within, you know, behind buildings and that type of thing that people drive on, people park on, people get their deliveries on. And we have service accesses behind every building that may not be easy to see on these smaller drawings, but, you know, when we get into technical review, you'll see that we have, you know, loading areas behind each building so that they can get the trash and they can get the FedEx, and the people moving in and out of the buildings can have a place to park and that type of thing. So it's very technical in nature, but it's important to mention now so that you know that we're thinking about them. And I just only wanted to bring about the idea of kind of considering these more as alleys than roads.
Thank you.
And speaking to that, if we're to consider them more like alleys than roads, what is the intent of the parking back there? Who would be using?
Well, that's a good question. So that would be for, I mean, we're calling all surface parking on this, even in the street, to be convenience parking. When you build a streetscape like this, you want to have parking on the street to the level of which it creates an energy and an environment to have it feel alive and feel like, you know, pedestrians on the sidewalk have that protection between themselves and the roadway, so there's a parking space there. It gives an energy to the project, is what I'm trying to say. If it was just a road with a sidewalk and a building, it tends to feel a little more dead. So the number of parking spaces is not anywhere near adequate to serve these buildings if they were surface parked only. Fortunately, there's no minimum or no minimum parking standard in this zone, so everything's going to be held through, you know, through the parking structures. I know I'm getting to the answer to the question. The back of house parking would be for deliveries and convenience. So if you just happen to know, hey, there's 5 spaces behind building B, I'm gonna go try to see if there's one there before I go drive into the structure, you would probably, you know, find that it's full, but they're there for you if they can do it. It just helps to create that atmosphere of a downtown, you know, versus a strip mall or
And that's kind of what I was getting at, is if I know there might be parking there. I mean, I could take the path of least resistance and go straight into the deck and not worry about it, but I could see a lot of folks driving all the way down Road A, nothing, take the roundabout, come back down Road C, nothing, well, let me just park in structure 2. So I could see that pattern, like, let me just take a chance, maybe there's something way down there, you know.
You know, that helps to disperse the traffic some so that it's not all congregating in one space. So I think that works to the benefit of the project to have that kind of curiosity or search for parking. I mean, we all do it when I come downtown. You know, I know there's a parking structure on Market Street, but heck, man, I'm going to circle a couple times and see if I find one on the street. It's human nature, and I think that adds to the activity level that we're looking for in this project.
Last question about parking that I've got, but is there any handicap park, would that on-street be handicap parking?
Yes, so that's a great one. So we have on-street parking for handicap. North of Building 12, there's a bank. Let me see if I can zoom in on this.
I can see it.
Yeah, so there's a bank of parking up here for, I mean, there will be handicap parking, and we're, you know, the EV and everything else that we need to do in the structure. So we're gonna meet code, but for convenience sake, yes, north of Building 12, there's a bank. South of Building 3A and 3B, there's a bank. And then whatever ends up happening behind what we call driveway H, where the pool amenity is, there's some handicap parking there as well. So we've got 3 areas designated for what I call public handicap parking, although it all is public. There's also Building 6, which has handicap parking, which is really, that lot, in our eyes, is sort of intended for the leasing office because that's where the leasing office is going to be on that side of Building 6. So those might have some time restriction if it's allowed by code to maybe say, you know, for use while visiting the leasing office or limited to an hour or two, whatever it is, just because they want to have the convenience of people being able to walk in and walk out to go talk to the office about renting an apartment. But we have handicap parking there as well. I think that's just 5 spots in that general area, if I remember right.
I guess in my mind, I was thinking, well, if all of that on-street parking were all handicapped, then it would greatly reduce, well, I know I can't park there, let me just park in the deck, you know?
If it was all handicap?
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, because then you couldn't park there.
Correct.
Yeah, well,
would
we
be-
have, no, I mean, Road A, this first section of Road A between Military Cutoff and Road D, there's no parking, because that's just, you know, ingress, egress. Road A, between D and B, what are we looking at? We're looking at like 7 spaces on each side of the street, so it's not a lot of parking. It's really park in the structure, get there early, or,
Okay.
you know, get lucky.
Stick to my promise and no more parking.
Dennis, do you know if the queuing, I assume, just if I'm looking at it right, egress from the facility is from Road A, I guess there's something between 5 and 12, but you can't egress on the north side, right? That's only ingress?
Correct.
Correct.
And then
So
you can
north of
egress
buil-
to the
nor-
south.
Yeah, north side of Building 12, that's in only, and that was a
Right.
DOT condition, I believe. Between 5 and 12 is right out only,
Right in,
So
right
if you want to make a
right
left.
in, right out.
Do we have any issues with, I mean, I'm assuming it was designed for this, any queuing of that initial stem off of Military Cutoff, or has that been
So,
reviewed?
yeah, we have 2 lefts and a right coming out.
That would have been reviewed at the TIA level, yeah.
Okay, so that's done. Okay, good, all right.
Yeah, there's 2 lefts, 1
And
right
yeah.
at that stop sign going out at A. There's also the connection Road B to Old Macomber, which is one of our variance requests. We need to fit that into an existing private utility access easement. And so the 100 feet offset between tangents, curves, is a radius requirement that we're asking variance on, just because you can see how it's got a little wiggle to it.
So, yeah, clarify that for me. So Road B is going to terminate at the property line. The right-of-way for Road B is going to terminate at the property line, and it will tie to Macomber
Correct.
via an easement?
yeah. Yeah, we're only granted an easement across that property, so that's what we're going to have. And that was part of, if you go back and look at the initial approval for this, I don't know if it fell into the conditional use or the special use permit, but it was shown on that, what we had and approved at that time, because there was a typical cross-section that was provided in there. And I have one. If you don't have it, I'd be happy to pass out and share with you.
That's fine. I don't really have any problem with that. I mean, I think, do you have any issues from a fire? And then we'll get to utilities in a minute, but. Right. Okay. And I think that's an important point too, is that, I mean, a lot of times, you know, when we get to TRC, I know there's some discussion of, oh, well, this is what was approved by SRB, this is kind of what we're going to go with. And I think in this case, you know, we have to defer a lot of those technical issues to the TRC. You know, if they request auto turns and something doesn't work, I mean, I still have some concerns about how a truck is going to circulate through B and D and then back out. You know, whether those corner radiuses are sufficient to be up, because they're showing it coming from Road B, looping up D and then out. But I don't think there's anything preventing a truck from coming in Road A. So can they make those turns?
And that's, you know, again, not with this plot that we have here. And I have the same concern. I know they're doing the auto turn to be able to get trucks behind the Weston, according to this, but I don't see any other auto turn illustrations through there. And I'm sure that, you know, from this board, I would like to be able to see auto turn being performed there for your main thoroughfares and accessibility, even though what you refer to as roadways, I still commonly call them alleys. Mm-hmm. You know, the radiuses and turns that are not indicated on there, I'd still be concerned about what auto turner would show for, you know, whether it be fire trucks, whether it be garbage trucks, you know, how we're going to get in and out of this.
So-
And that would be something that we would I would absolutely like to see, even from this board standpoint.
Understood. To address that, just in general conversation here, not trying to persuade you one way or other, just trying to make something to think about. You know, we're designing Road A to be, you know, meet the intent of the design ordinance. The ordinance talks about design, you know, for UMX. And that's to create this, you know, old downtown feel. Basically, you know, picture again downtown Wilmington on a blank slate. So we're designing these roads based on standards that may not meet what you're asking for. You know, if you want to put radiuses, let's say at the corner of Building 4, so a WB 50 truck fits there, you're going to be looking at a 45 to a 40-foot radius on that curb. We're showing 15s and 20s because that's the way streets were designed, you know, 20,
Yeah, but you
40,
also got a
60
median
years
in
ago.
there. But you also got a median in there, which is limiting the turning radius.
Well, but we're also widening, we've got 14-foot drive lanes to help to accommodate because we know that, you know, that is probably less noticeable to the design than to have a 40-foot radius on these corners and making these streets further apart from one another because now all of a sudden we've got, you know, 40-foot radiuses coming in. The pedestrian feel is lost. I mean, we might as well be designing a shopping center somewhere. And from an urban design standpoint, these smaller radiuses are what the intent of the ordinance is. Now, we can have paths to travel, we do. I mean, Road B will accommodate a truck all the way in, get to the Weston, get out through Road D, then Road A, as shown. FedEx trucks, typical trucks like that, you know, there's smaller fire truck that we model. All those that's no problem. But if we're going to try to design this for 18-wheelers, we're going to have, you know, we're going to have some issues. And I only say that just to be honest with you because we're really trying to meet this tight grid that's required. And we want it. We want a tight grid. And we want it to be this nice pedestrian-friendly experience with 12-foot sidewalks. If we start putting 40-foot radiuses on these, we're going to have to go down to like 8-foot sidewalks, 6-foot sidewalks. And that's just not going to look right. So we're hoping just to find the balance. And I'm not speaking from an engineering standpoint because I'm a landscape architect, designer. Rob, you know, he's an engineer. He understands that talk a little bit better, what you're getting at. I'm just trying to put another
It's also
voice on it.
it's also the intent of the developer here to not have that experience. I mean, again, we're not looking to put delivery trucks down Road A. Again, we can tell them, is somebody going to do it? They may, you know, do it. But I think, you know, again, I'll go back to Mayfair because we're right down the road from this, and a lot of us have been there, and we know it. You don't see a lot of delivery trucks pulling in Mayfair. I don't. I live right down the road from it. You see them now. They know the best way to go to service the buildings they want to service. Are they going to turn down the main road? Yeah, they'll make the mistake once or twice, and then they're either going to find themselves going to the cul-de-sac and then going back around Road C. Like, they're going to figure it out and do it. But the intent of this, and again, I know, you know, we can't come in here with all the pretty pictures and show you and do the flyovers, but if you saw the intent of what we're trying to design, you would understand a little bit better how that feel is trying to come together. And, you know, again, like Mike said, if we have to model a WB 50, 65 truck down Road A on any side road here, again, you're going to lose that feel because we all know you're going to end up with at least 40-foot radiuses to do that. So, you know, again, that wasn't the intent of this design. Every other road in here, you know, we have auto turn for all of it. We've auto turned, you know, we've done fire, we've done garbage trucks, we've done the WB 50 delivery trucks. Like, we know where everybody needs to have their deliveries, and everything works to those points.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'm not trying to say put 40-foot radiuses on everything. I know downtown they don't have that, and they use more of the intersection to be able to, the larger trucks to be able to navigate it, because you are going to get the larger delivery trucks. It's just the way it is.
Yep.
And I don't have a problem with that happening here too, but I think it's the compounding effect. You know, maybe on Road B is where I see the biggest issue, is where you have those couple of medians, you know, kind of between buildings 4 and 7 and the parking structure 1 and 7. There's some medians in there that might be restricting movement. So, I mean, I'll kick that to the TRC. If the TRC feels like, you know, or, you know, if, when Chris is looking at it in the TRC, they feel like they can't navigate through there, that'll be a TRC comment. I think that's kind of, I think what we're looking at it from is, you know, this is private streets, so if something doesn't work about it, you know, it's on you. We just have to sort of determine if there's any real public safety issues that are associated with this that we need to.
And
There's
any
fl-
other issues?
We do have some flexibility in those medians between 4 and 7 if we need to go through that in technical review. What the intent of those medians are, just for the record, is that we don't want people walking down Road A if they're heading, let's say, you know, towards the west end, to look down the street and look right into a loading dock. So they're strategically placed medians to block views of the loading dock, either from parking structure 1, if you're walking to the back alley F towards the west end, you've got a median to put some trees in so that you're not looking in the back of a garage. So they're not there arbitrarily, they're there by design.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something that's also looked at TRC. I mean, we had an issue, Gingerwood, I remember, where they had some trees that were obstructing pedestrians. So, I mean, all that's going to get hashed out, and I certainly don't have any problem, as I said at the beginning, I don't have any problem with non-standard, you know, medians or on-street parking or whatever, creating a non-standard right-of-way width. That's not an issue for me, but. Any other discussion on this? I know I did have a question for Gary on the elimination of the non-municipal easements. If this was are these going to be public utilities through here?
Well, we're uncomfortable with eliminating the 10-foot non-municipal easement anywhere there's public utilities because there's a history of conflicts, and the downtown city model is, you know, we can look at and see gas mains over water mains and gas mains over sewer mains. So absent some explicit plan to prevent these private utilities from being next to the water and sewer, we favor by our standards guidance to maintain the 10-foot non-municipal easements along proposed rights of way where we have public utilities.
Yeah.
And I would say, you know, if this were, you know, a public street, we kind of have a similar, in engineering, you know, we kind of have a similar approach, is that, you know, we waive the non-municipal easement only when we have a specific plan to accommodate those non-municipal utilities elsewhere, or without conflict. So I'm also, that's why I mentioned it, is, I mean, I was a little bit nervous about when I saw that, about sort of the blanket waiver of like, yeah, we'll figure it out. I believe you will, but I you know, perhaps that's something we can also kick to the technical review level and allow some flexibility to reduce it. I don't know. But.
Just some real quick, because I've had a little more insight, and I'll just share a little bit with you what's gone on. So we've had our meetings with Jeff at CFPUA. We sat down, we've kind of discussed what's going to be public, what's going to be private on this, so we kind of know where our public and private mains are going to be. The reason really for the request is when we say 10 foot, the 10 foot's hardened, and as you know from this code, we can't have buildings no more than 10 foot off the right of way. So we're already kind of biting ourselves, and now we're probably going to have foundation issues inside 10-foot non-municipals. Like, we just see those issues arising. So since we're controlling development of the entire site, it's not like a new lot subdivision where you have lots and you sell it to builder A, B, and C, and they all come in, and it gets built different times and stuff gets plowed in, you know, afterwards. We're controlling the development of the whole thing. We're working directly with Duke, Piedmont Natural Gas. You know, we're putting all this stuff in all the appropriate easements that need to be there. So when we come through with full design, you'll see everything. We'll see all the electrical, we'll see the communications, you know, and all the lines and where they're going to be. Because again, the public part of the utilities are only going to be down the main roads. You know, a lot of these alleys, they're not taking over those, so they're private. So that's up to us to, you know, to communicate with the two, because we're going to own those lines and have to maintain them. But where we are in the main roads, I mean, we're going to have, you know, dedicated easements for everybody instead of just giving them the blanket easement and coming out and ripping up sidewalks and planters and every time they want to plow something in. So we want to control where they go too, and not just have a full blanket right to come down the side of the road or 10 foot outside the right of way and have at it. So, that's all what we have ongoing with, again, with Duke and everybody. Duke's coming up with their plans. They're going to show us where the transformers go. We're all going to work together, tweak where all the distribution lines go. We're going to figure it out. And then we'll come right back on top of that with communications and natural gas. So, because this will be served by natural gas also. But, all those are going to be accounted for.
Okay. All right. What else? Any other concerns?
Yeah, I do. The variance justification, I'm not really understanding, and this really isn't the point, but I want to kind of put a pin in this, because it seems that they're saying that there's, by achieving one of the, I'm talking about the first one.
Still first one, okay.
Yeah, still the first one. That it's basically pitting the 400-foot offset between intersecting street lines against the maximum 400-foot block length, and those are not in conflict. I mean, it seems to me one is just kind of playing the safety. Now, as far as what these dimensions were created for, was exactly for this condition. I mean, historically, we have the 1945 city limits. That's where basically the grid falls off, right? And like every city in America in the 1950s, after the invention of the automobile, it went gangbusters, it built for cars instead of for people. So we get, highways that go out to suburban places and people are driving back and forth and not walking everywhere like they want to be. So what this is intending to do is to reintroduce that successful design component back into the city grid rather than perpetuate a vehicle-centric type of building. That's what it's for. So if we look at the conditions that we would find, which this is trying to speak to, we would find, shelve the center line to center line for a second, just a block face average of around 300 feet. In between that, you would expect to find an alley. So maybe the distance between the street and the alley might be around 150 feet. And so this is about half of that. And so now think about that now. So you're on a block, right, out here in the city, and about 75 feet away is another street, rather than, so that's beyond even where an alley would be, right? And so I think that this, again, I appreciate the walkability, the compact nature of it. That's not the problem. I think the problem is the inability of this design to achieve this kind of basic knitting first pass that seeks to reintroduce the urban grid back into these kind of developments. That's what this is for. And this, again, if we just think about what that's going to be like out there. So
can I ask for clarification? So you would rather see it spread out more?
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I've said 3 times that I think the compact nature of it is great, and I think the walkability is absolutely fantastic. What I'm saying is, though, that this 400-foot or maximum 400-foot, let's say, block face, compounded with how you design the streets. Let me put it, for example, the road, you've got Road A going through the middle. That's kind of like your main street for this development. If there weren't roads C and D, it wouldn't be that much of a problem. Now, what I'm not, and believe me, I understand, I see your site here, you've got wetlands, you're bumping up against, a stormwater pond over on one end. I mean, I see what's happening here. So it's not like you have to just lay out this perfect 400-foot grid and we're expecting that to work. But some sort of acknowledgement of the character of what this is going to look like, I think would be important, and what this is going to feel like. I cannot think of an example where we have 2 roads this close together. I just don't.
Let me jump in for one clarity, because I think, when we had the first initial, your first question to me was about, what do you think the distance is here? And then we kind of, went off, and I said, I think it's around 175, and then you said, okay, so then we ended up with 60 to 70 feet building depth. If I just do the math on this and look, and if I'm between Road A and Road C's got a 40-foot right-of-way on it. So to the middle, there's 20 foot to the building, okay? Because the right-of-way is pretty darn close to it. I can see it from here. So I got 20 foot there, and then that section of Road A, so we have 80, so we have 40. So you're taking 60 feet off of 175. We're talking upwards of 100. So it's 100 to 110 to 15 feet of that block length. If we look at downtown and we have that same theory and you're saying it's 400 feet and we have a mid-alley, okay, it's around 200. We're not, that's what I'm trying to say. I think what Mike's, the point, and it may be what you're saying too, I'm just trying to help myself better clarify this. We're not talking, this isn't from me to you away. This isn't a short distance of that nature. I mean, you know, again, it's 100 feet between, we'll call it a road and an alley, and I don't think that's, you know, again, these back of houses, they just, in my opinion to this, and the way that we're trying to design something for circulation, shouldn't have that kind of traffic, where, you know, again, the block length, your first comment about the stacking was a very valid comment, and I understand it, and that's why I said we've been mulling over what do we do with that intersection, and that's a TRC issue. I think we all can work that out. That's not a big deal to do. But again, in this distance, and again, that walkability, like Mike said, they really function more as an alley and not a road. And I know what you're saying. If it was two roads that were 80 foot wide, I would tend to agree with you and say, that's kind of crazy. You feel like you're on an interstate and you put a building in the middle. You know, that's what it would almost feel like. But that's not what that's completely the opposite of what we're talking about. You know, that avenue is the main road. That is where the concentration will be. This back road is just back of house. So we could easily change that to alley and it would be justifiable in my opinion, because that's really what it is.
Yeah. If we,
and how that works.
Yeah, I can almost see the argument in the reverse too. If we didn't have Road C and Road D and we met that intent of the ordinance, I could hear the screaming for, hey, it's a dead end one-way road. You know, it's a linear project, so you got to get in and out somehow. And if Road A was our only road, because honestly, the distance between Road C and Road D is probably 400 feet. So you'd have to eliminate an entire road section. These aren't auto-centric buildings. There's very little parking associated with the buildings. The parking is in the structures, which is what the ordinance intends. So what we're trying to do is, you know, squeeze between a pond, which is existing, a wetlands, which is to the north. It's a narrow linear site. We're providing a narrow linear design in the intent of the ordinance, which is to create a walkable, short blocks, which are also very walkable, wide sidewalks, which are very walkable, limited street parking. I mean, you check all the boxes. So if it's the one caveat or the one objection is, hey, you know, the distance between Road C and Road A is not 400 feet. I mean, that would kill the project if you try to make this 400 feet.
I disagree. It would mean you'd have to go back to the drawing board a little bit on some things. I mean, because let me finish here, because I just did a little quick measurement on the on-street parking on Road A. If I imagine those spaces are 10 by 20, is that safe?
They're 23 by 8.
23 by 8, so even longer. So let's just play conservative. They're 20 feet. So we're about, if we look at building number 2 from, not the bump out, but from the curb line of the sidewalk to the other one is about 80 feet, right? I mean, I just kind of measured it out with what you have here drawn. Again, that's half of what we would expect to find, the distance between an alley and the street grid, right? And as far as, you know, it's hard for me to understand how the building's not designed for vehicles whenever it's surrounded by a roadway and cars. I don't see 2, 4, 8, well, 8 has
Well, they don't have,
some
I mean, there's no driveway, no garage. It's not designed to house vehicles. It's not designed to service vehicles. Yeah, you have service. I mean, and I know this is just a difference of opinion because design is all about opinion. So if your opinion is that they're too close together, I can appreciate that. I would just hope that you could also appreciate the factors that we're working on and trying to make this meet the intent of the ordinance. You know, somewhere in between there's probably the right answer. I just don't know what it is, other than telling you if we had to go 400 feet between these, which the ordinance says we can't exceed 400 feet. So if we had to go 400 feet, I mean, you're looking at probably a project that may not even go to fruition because that's not the intent of the developer.
But I would also add too that, you know, this is a conditional site plan. This was approved through council. Generally, this format, this is what they approved. They approved the same layout that everybody got to see early on, that got a special use permit, a conditional use permit. We're working within those parameters. That's what we're working within. This isn't we have a free will, free range here to go start moving and changing things. This was all decided on a, you know, judicial hearing right here in this room.
Have you ever seen this?
But that's
Can
what
I get a clarification from staff, please? Has this been decided, or are we determining this right now?
There is a conditional district master plan that was approved, I believe that Mike is showing you right now.
Thank you.
That dictates the general pattern of development. There was a modification that was approved of that master plan that follows what you see on your screen today.
Sir, I'm sorry, you're going to have to come down and speak into a microphone so that it's picked up on the recording.
I see it, though, thank you.
So what we did was we took this and went through an administrative approval process in order to create a more grid-like pattern because, first of all, this was one road in, one road out with some service to the back of these buildings, but it was really a dead-end design, to be quite honest with you. And so what we ended up doing is, working with other consultants, developed the pattern that better reflects a downtown type feel by having, a gridded system of roads and multiple ways to get in and out of this project. Something that better reflected the idea of an urban downtown core versus this, which, this is pretty much like this.
So again, we have the same really scenario right there.
Yeah.
And this really where it came down to just went into the connect instead of really serving a back of house for them. So that was really the only real change to it is to give it a true back of house with another connection.
Thanks, y'all.
I would say that bringing that map back up does come back to the stem length between military cutoff and road D. I know that's not one of the variances here, but what's shown on that map is quite a bit longer than what's shown on the screen. Would that be fair?
This road hasn't moved at all.
No, the next road.
This moved
Yes.
over, that's what you're saying, because there's the two buildings.
So we made it
So it goes to
longer.
the right.
It's actually,
It's actually longer. There's a longer stem now between the road D and road B.
but I think the stacking exiting toward military cutoff is actually shorter now, correct? Okay.
Sorry, I'll say it for the microphone. We've gotten all the stacking lengths and everything. Davenport has run it all through DOT and has gotten that all approved in there, and that's all part of their design. That'll all be approved by DOT for the stacking.
We gotta start.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I know you got to get about your business. All I would say is, and I know maybe we can work out some of these issues about blocks in a conversation and technical review. Maybe we can talk about, what the queuing is going to be. A lot of these technical things that keep coming up that I think are keeping, y'all from doing your job right now, which is to vote on these individual issues. I would just say, I think we really have a good project here, which reflects the intent of the ordinance, which is to create that urban tight core, pedestrian core. We would just hate for some of these smaller items, which may be holding up, a vote here or there. I know we need 4/5 of a vote to get these things through, without giving us an opportunity to work through them. What's the old saying? It's like, don't let the seek of excellence get in the better of the good or something like that. I'm totally butchering that, but it's like we got a really good project here, and I think there's never going to be a perfect solution to some of these, and a lot of this is design, and like I said before, a lot of design is about perception and goals of the project.
We're good. Start with number 3. Seems like that might be.
Okay, so, we're gonna come back to the 400-foot one.
Rob, I'm going to need you to speak into the microphone. Thanks.
Come back to I gotta turn it on before I can speak into it. That's why it wasn't working. That's better. We're gonna come back to the 400-foot in a minute. I think there's maybe we jump to number 3. Is there, on the non-municipal easement, do we have the ability to, if they're requesting a waiver from it, I think generally how that's handled is we can approve those once we have a more defined utility layout. is it within our purview to sort of kick that waiver to the TRC level if the applicant can provide a more detailed non-municipal layout? The TRC has the ability to approve a reduction. I mean, is that something that, I mean, I just don't know that we have enough information right now to be able to approve that. And I don't want to force them into accepting some sort of utility conflict that couldn't be resolved simply because we agreed to waive that 10-foot non-municipal easement.
I think perhaps, and obviously this is your call, but if that's the direction you're leaning, maybe a conditional motion for conditional approval might be appropriate. Some
Yeah.
language along the lines of it could, subject to utilities being accommodated on site, as required, the municipal easement could be reduced or waived in its entirety, as may be appropriate.
Yeah, I like that. And I mean, perhaps, with the discussion we've had about the block length does present opportunities for utilities potentially being located, elsewhere. So does that okay with the authority? Does all that sound good for you, or what's your position on that?
Well, we trust the applicant and the applicant's engineer to operate in good faith, and so something along those lines sounds suitable, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to make the motion to, we're talking about variance number 3. I'm going to make the motion to conditionally approve the non-municipal easement reduction, conditioned upon, the applicant providing utility layouts to the technical review committee and, resolving those conflicts at the TRC level. Hopefully no conflicts there, but.
I'll second.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Second.
Yeah. That's, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So that's number 3. That's 4.
We haven't talked about it.
Oh, the non-standard 80, 60, 80, and 90-foot right-of-way sections. Again, as I said at the beginning, I don't have any problem with a non-standard right-of-way width to accommodate, landscaping medians, on-street parking, any of that. So I personally don't have an issue with that one.
Which waiver number are you discussing?
4,
Okay.
I believe.
And 5.
Is 5 part of that too?
Well, that's a cross-section. Do you want to look at that different?
Yeah, we'll do that one separate. Let's just do 4. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve variance request number 4 with the justification of that this site design is providing on-street parking, variable median, landscape median, and other amenities along the roadway.
I'll second it.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. So that was 4. I'm going to jump to, wait a minute, hang on. Variance number 6, which is the tangent length. I feel like there kind of is. I mean, I don't know that we see it entirely on this exhibit that was provided, but I do think that there is a site constraint to the geometric standards. So I'll make the motion to approve the waiver for the minimum tangent length between horizontal curves for Street B, I guess as it connects to Old Macomber Road, based upon site constraints.
Is that the only place where that happens?
Is it the only place where that happens? Does the applicant have any? That's it? Okay, I believe that is. So that I've made the motion I think we need a second.
I'll second.
Second, Chad? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, that's 6. So we've done 3, 4, 6. Any other suggestions as to what's next?
What is 7? Where is 7 located? On road?
Guys, I think we do have to have a discussion about, I don't even know which one this falls into, but that plaza area, can you scoot the drawing down? Thank you. The plaza area along Road A, on the kind of the east end of the west end, this is very, very similar to what we had at the last meeting. And I don't see any kind of physical barrier, light poles, landscaping. I just don't feel like there's enough justification. I imagine there'll be something there, and I was wondering if the applicant could speak to that. So as I understand it, that plaza area across Road A, connecting up the green space to the, is that still the west end? I don't know. But Building 7, is there going to be, I know it's going to be at grade across Road A, so Road A is going to raise up, it's going to be kind of table at grade, and then over to, Building 8 in that green space. What do we have in there to direct cars to stay on the roadway?
Okay, yes, and it doesn't show in this level drawing. You're correct,
Yeah.
so I'll explain it to you. Yeah, it is a tabletop, so the cars will come up to that level. Anytime a pedestrian exits the protected sidewalk area, they'll be meted with truncated domes, and there will also be, in certain areas where the width is such that a vehicle could enter the pedestrian area, a bollard. So they are notified that they're entering a zone in which vehicles can be present. There are 3 intermediate islands, I'm going to call them, for lack of a better term, that would be right underneath where it says Road A, 60-foot private right-of-way. There's some dividers in there to keep the cars, going their own way so that they're separated, but they could also make a left into the valet area or a right out of the valet area.
Where's the valet area?
The valet is where the Westin Hotel has the H-type shape, so you got a back courtyard and then a front courtyard that's on the Road A private right-of-way side.
Okay.
That pull in there, there'll be a porte-cochere, and there's going to be a valet drop-off, which will be, have curbed landscaped areas, which also help to direct traffic as well. And then in there, this whole roadway is decorative paving. It's all pavers, and the paving design changes dramatically once you enter that plaza as well to alert vehicles that you're in a zone or an area which is you're going to anticipate pedestrians. So much like a crosswalk, but at a much larger scale.
Yeah, it's as wide as your blocks.
Yeah, it's going to be quite an awesome feature to the design. It's very European in its design, that it has an emphasis on pedestrians and not an emphasis on vehicular traffic. Vehicles will have to traverse through that area, but we almost consider it a shared space because it has that feel of being able to walk out of the building as a pedestrian and walk across to that plaza green space, which is going to be integrated into the design as well, and make you feel like you're somewhere special versus crossing a street.
Sure, no, I understand. Now, can you, I'm sorry, and I maybe you explained it, but I didn't understand it. So you're not, if a car wants to be dropped off at the Westin, are they driving down Alley F, or are they driving down Road A? How do they get into the drop-off area? Is it underneath what is shown as the building on here?
Yeah, okay. I did not explain that at all, so let me walk you through that. So if you were checking into the Westin Hotel, you would drive down Road A, and you would come to the porte-cochere, the drop-off valet area, which is at the front of the Westin, right? I'm going to use this mouse. Can I get this?
Oh, yeah, thank
you. Or Brian, can you do it, or I do it?
There you go.
There you go. So not shown there is there's going to be an overhang that comes out off of the front of the hotel, which you can drive under. And there'll be room for valet to park several cars that may be waiting to get picked up by folks that are checking in or out, and have 2 lanes of traffic so that you're not blocking anybody from getting in and out. underneath this covered, you know, technically it's called a porte cochere, it's called a drop-off, it's called a, you know, a rain buffer, or whatever you want to call it. It extends out. So you would check in, do your thing. If you're valeting, the valet is going to take your car and they're going to run it over to parking structure 1. If you're self-parking, you're going to exit. You could go left on Road A because of the way we've had it designed, or you could take a right, hit the roundabout, and come back to Road A, and then hit Road B, take a left, and park in parking structure 1. Alley F is basically non-vehicular use. It's there for car shows, boat shows, staging in and out of the conference center. It's for, you know, special display. It's also for fire, if fire needs to get through
So
there.
it's not going to be open for vehicular use on a
It's got
day-to-day
bollards.
basis?
It's going to have removable bollards, fire code approved, removable bollards. It's, we call that the pedestrian promenade in the design. It's going to be, you know, enhanced pavers. It's going to have some decorative lighting, you know, a balustrade type of railing to it along the water. It's going to feel really nice, and it's also going to also provide potential breakout space from the conference element that's here. If you have special events where you want to have a bar, outdoors, you know, by the water, it's really an exterior part of the hotel itself. But it's not intended, you know, it has vehicular access to it. I mean, there's a way to do it, but if you and I came down there and want to drive down there, we're going to be met with a bollard, unless we have a key or we're fire department.
For Alley F, okay.
Yeah.
I think to just add to that a little bit, they've got traffic calming on kind of bookending that plaza space as well. I mean, you're going to be coming off a roundabout, which is going to slow you down, in addition to street parking, a median on the road is shown for Road A on the other side of it.
And you're going to have bollards on the north side of that raised area as well?
Yes. So on the Building 8 side?
Building 8
Yeah,
side,
Building
yes.
8, the green space area, there's also, you know, I wish I should have brought, we've developed these into more into construction drawings since we've
No,
turned these
I
in.
can kind of envision what you're talking about.
But, you know, there's a landscape strip that runs along there to direct people as much as possible to where we want them to cross safely, even though it's all zero curb in there. We have designed the paving patterns to cue people where to walk, the bollards, the truncated domes are everything designed. I mean, we're taking extra caution here because honestly, I mean, in a downtown streetscape, you don't see a lot of just zero curb interaction with vehicle and pedestrian. So we're attempting to do something really special here that we feel creates this, I just want to call it more of a European feel, but I mean, you do see it in larger cities in the United States.
Okay.
So along, I see that it says 60-foot right-of-way along that section.
So the 60-foot right-of-way is because the porte cochere sticks out so far from the hotel. Yeah, so
So there's a,
It's a bump out.
up and to the left, there's a cross-section for a 60-foot right-of-way that
here,
I
right
don't-
here. You talking about right here, Road A?
Up and to the left on this sheet of paper, it's off the screen, up and to the left. I think it's on this screen. There's some cross-section,
Is it this?
Oh, yeah. Let's see here. Does it show that
You have
over
a
there?
pointer?
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
No?
Let me see if I can get to it.
it's right here.
All right.
There-
That's the
so
90, that's
there's
the 80.
90, the 80, the 60.
60.
Okay.
Does that describe at all what you're saying?
It does because there's a center island landscape planner which occurs, it's not continuous.
Okay.
It's broken up into small, it's 3 circular design pieces that have trees in them.
Okay.
To help provide some directional
There was
capabilities to the
A
vehicles.
17-foot drive aisle adjacent to the Westin that enters that portico area?
The 14-foot is adjacent to the Westin.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so where that 14-foot ends is where the roof overhang stops from the hotel. So it's actually greater than 14. It's just the fact that the right-of-way stops because now we're driving under structure.
Okay.
Does that, I think the more I talk, the more confusing it gets.
No, I mean, I understand, like, you're going to be coming down Road A, and you're going to swing into the right underneath the porte cochere.
Yeah.
You come out on the sort of right side of that open area that's not shown on the screen right now. But you said you can make a left
You
back
could make
out
a
on
left.
the Road A?
Yes.
Or you can make a right down to the roundabout?
And then swing around and go back, yeah. So the parking structure 1 is really Weston's parking. The porte cochere, the drop-off area is, you know, temporary use, valet, pickups, that type of thing. We do have a loading, on Road E, when you turn the corner from the roundabout, there's a loading space there, so that if the valet gets overrun at one particular time, if they got extra cars waiting, they can have staging there. And also, if you've got, because there is some retail components to the building there, FedEx, UPS, that type of thing can park there. It's such a small scale that I think when we get into the technical review committee and you start seeing these at 20 scale and 10 scale and these blow-ups, there's going to be a ton of detail to really pick apart and get a better understanding of what's happening.
And that's not even a variance, but number 13 might be low-hanging fruit.
Let's go with the low-hanging fruit and deal with number 13, because I don't even know if really a variance should have been required if it's not really open for vehicular use. We're talking about Alley F. Does anybody have any concerns about that? I mean, I don't think we need to conditional approve it. If they're saying that they're going to provide removable bollards, then I don't think we need to conditionally approve it. So I'll make a motion that we approve waiver number 13 for the conditions noted on the justification provided by the applicant. And that's all. Yeah, the lack of regular vehicular use is the main justification for that.
Second.
Seconded.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, so that's waiver number 13. We have a few of them that are non-standard variable width right-of-way. Trying to figure out. Brian, do you have that slide that has a summary of waivers that you can get to? Thank you. So we've got non-standard cross-sections for B. I don't know what's going on.
B and E.
Yeah, you can just leave it like that, it's fine. Yeah, so we just approved that. Oh, he's going to highlight the ones we've approved. We've got 5, 9, 11, and 12 are non-standard cross-sections. Yeah, we've already covered that.
I've got some discussion on that would apply to all
Sure.
of them.
Yeah.
Anywhere you have pavereds, we're going to need a hold harmless to where we don't have to replace pavements when we do repairs. Rob, I think you're familiar with that, and that shouldn't be a problem in TRC.
Yeah, we'll address that in TRC. It's not, and that's kind of why we went to private roads also, so
Yeah.
we kind of knew that was coming, so.
And on Street E, you're showing some on-street parking over top of our public water line, and our guidance and standards would not encourage on-street parking over top of our public water line, so we're hoping you can revisit that.
Yeah, I think that one there, if I'm not I have to go back and look at that part there because we've gotten comments after this, and some of that is private now.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's that's, I mean, there's public and private on this, that's, you know, different runs, and that's, we'll delineate that very clearly on TRC plans.
Would you be open to then a caveat that says there'd be no on-street parking over top of public utilities?
I don't think that's an issue. Yeah, I don't think that's an issue on here. I'm just trying to visualize in my mind real quick. That shouldn't be an issue on it, I don't believe.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Another low-hanging fruit item may be item number 8, reduction in minimum width of a median on a collector street. Does anybody have any objection to that one? My thought would be, as long as the TRC can demonstrate that the, auto turns can accommodate the design vehicle and fire truck, design delivery vehicle and a fire truck, I don't have any problem with that. Okay, well, I'll just make that a motion then. I will make the motion to approve waiver number 8, the reduction in the minimum width of a median on a collector street, conditional upon, the TRC, demonstrating to the TRC through auto turns that they can accommodate the design delivery vehicle and fire truck.
I'll second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's 8. Anybody have any suggestions on where to go next? This sheet is helpful. Thank you, Brian, for highlighting that. Or whoever's doing it. I don't know, maybe it's Amy.
Cross-section B.
Are there any concerns about the non-standard street cross-sections?
There's not for me. Mine are maybe questions. The brow that's over there off of building 1A and 1B. That doesn't look like a right-of-way to me. I really don't think we should be having drop-off areas like that in the right-of-way. I think it should function more like what he was describing for the Portico area for the Weston, where that portion of the drop-off is outside the right-of-way. But didn't you indicate that that's not in the right-of-way?
Correct, yeah, we weren't going to have a right-of-way on that portion of the site.
Okay. Well, I mean, when they get to the TRC process, they may, look at driveway entrances in that area, which could get weird just by the configuration of it, but I'm going to put it in the capable hands of the TRC to figure that out. But
Rob, is there any reason there's 2 lanes there in that drop-off? It seems like that could be.
I think it was just one for a movement if cars are stacked, to give somebody a turnout without turning out onto the road itself yet.
Okay.
is that
Just a
a
way to move, or even a turnaround for that matter.
is that a dumpster on the north side of 1A? What is that?
That's an area we're looking at for a yard to be in there for dumpsters and anything else we can get in there. So a way to get a truck in off the road, that's one of our centralized locations.
Huh.
So for us, it would either just be, like you said, a driveway connection.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the backing movements and such. We'll have to let the TRC handle that as well. But as far as the non-standard elements,
10, yeah.
what's that?
I think that's number 10.
10?
Yeah.
Sorry about all the confusion about the numbers
No, it's
here.
okay.
There's a lot of them. Okay, so the one we were just talking about was number 10. Why do we need a variance if it's not in the right of way?
I like that. Again, this
Staff?
came up in our conceptual TRC, so I think it was safer to address it than not to address it now.
Okay. Maybe, I'm struggling to see what's non-standard about that if that's not in the right of way.
I still think you'd probably need to address, sorry, that was really loud. I guess that's the first part of it, the cul-de-sac. It seems to address 2 different aspects. I could be mistaken, but
No, you're probably right.
So just a point of clarification, if I guess the pull-off was just removed in its entirety and all you saw were the travel lanes where the road seat kind of made the bend, there's no waivers required for that.
Right. And that's what I'm envisioning.
I think that, again, just to reiterate what the applicant stated, this is such an atypical kind of situation. I think they just put it on there so we could have a discussion, and if it's not necessary, obviously, we can move on from that.
Yeah, I don't think we need to approve that one because I don't know that I like the 2-lane aspect of it, and I don't want to give it any kind of approval that might, I feel like we understand what might be necessary there, and, I'm not really sure.
Would there be a issue with distance between driveways because they're kind of having an in and out on the road?
Do we know, would that be considered a major thoroughfare?
No.
Yeah, so I don't think so. You're
Okay.
only talking about 6.5 feet, if I'm not mistaken. And I believe they can distance between driveways. I know that if we have an in and an out, 2 one-way driveways function as one driveway. There could potentially be a distance separation issue between the driveways. So in other words, if the in and the ingress and the egress, I think they have to, gosh, I don't remember it. Eric, can you raise your hand? Do you remember that section of code? Do you know which one we're talking about, or not code, standards? Yeah, I believe it's 20 feet between driveways. Okay. I don't know that they're going to meet 20 feet. Oh, look at that. Okay.
Here you go. Here's a couple of things that we had going on here that we want to make sure were included in the conversation, where this is where that dog leg occurs, less than 200 feet. We've got less than 100-foot radius, it's a center line radius. We have 42.5, as you can see there. The intent of this drop-off, I think, is clear, but it's, you know, it's to provide valet. Also, if Building 1A becomes a restaurant, as anticipated, that it's also for drop-off for the restaurant, for valet, but this is valet for anybody who comes to the shopping center that might want to park their car at parking structure 2 and have it dropped off by valet. But, you know, they're just, in our opinion, there's a lot going on here, and we wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of it in case there were any objections that we could deal with, we could start to deal with when we get to TRC. But to have it covered was sort of just, you know, us being safe.
It's a blanket.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't have any problem with it. I'll make the motion to, how am I going to say this? I mean, I guess it's a motion to approve, but the drop-off area is not in the right-of-way. I mean, I think that's ultimately what we're hoping to get to.
Here's the terminus of the right-of-way. You see it right here where the
Okay.
cursor is? And it comes right down there. So this all stops, and now this would just be, this is just in that driveway.
So it's a private road, that's a private access area.
How to word this? Do you have any thoughts, Dennis or Chad or anybody on?
Do we pull it off since it's not right-of-way, and it just will be handled under the TRC review?
So what does that dash line represent? That's that circular dash line?
Right here, that's our 40-foot radius, which is what's required at a standard cul-de-sac if you're going to do it. It's shown for reference to allow you to visualize how a car will make this movement. Again, it's just our justification for why we have this. It is somewhat of an awkward design because we're trying to fit between all these different structures and also have the driveway or the road, whatever that is, that road E. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. C. Function. But that dash line is merely dashed for imaginary purposes, so that you can visualize the fact that a car can make that radius and we're not getting into a situation where a car gets pinned in there.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a lot of movements going on there. If you're coming from the intersection there and you make a left onto, what is that, Road C?
Road C.
And then you're looping back off to the left into the drop-off area, and then you have people coming out of the drop-off area making lefts back in. I mean, there's kind of a lot going on there. I wish there was a better way to do that. I'm not opposed to some sort of a drop-off. I don't know.
Would there be a way to, would y'all be amenable to not allowing a left into that valet area?
So this guy can't do that.
So they would have to come from the north?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we could say that. I don't know how we're going to do that. Just being honest here, we can put.
I mean, to Rob's point, if a standard cul-de-sac's got a 40-foot radius,
Yeah.
and you're a vehicle that's coming out of the parking structure for whatever reason, you turn right, you're heading toward that, it would be very difficult for you to make that maneuver. There's less than a 40-foot radius around that entire area. So if there's already a car in there.
No, I don't disagree with what you're saying there. I think that's something, again, we could look at with, just templates and auto turns and just try to see how, if we can.
But if it's not in the right-of-way,
But it's not.
then there's no, you know what, I'm going to make, I don't know, I mean, I feel like almost like we need to disapprove that variant, that waiver, because it's not necessary. If it's not in the right-of-way, then there's no waiver to consider.
Second that.
Would the sidewalk, is it going to loop around, sort of follow buildings 1B and 1A?
Correct.
So, okay, so there's not going to be any sidewalk between the drop-off and, what is that road? Is that Road C that goes off?
So there's a 10-foot sidewalk on the north side of Building 1B.
That follows the buildings and then
Follows the
continues on
building,
up?
and there's a 12-foot on the side of Building 1A.
Okay.
So it's all concrete.
And it's all private right-of-way, so there's no public
It's all private
pedestrian
right-of-way.
easement or anything
It's,
like that?
It's going to be zero curb, just like, with the domes and the bollards, just like the other discussion we had. It's going to,
We've had enough discussion to where I feel like you guys understand the concerns. Do you mind pulling that waiver? If it's not in the right-of-way, a waiver is not necessary.
Yeah, if the board doesn't feel that waiver 10 is required, then we'll withdraw that.
Okay.
and that also, this is also related to number 2,
2.
waiver request number 2. So if it's not in the right-of-way, does that still apply, I guess? Can we pull number 2 as well?
Oh, was this the one that was number 2?
Yep.
Wasn't there another situation where this occurred?
200
Well,
foot
no,
between
it's not.
center lines, opposite sides.
Less than 200 feet between these streets.
Is there 200 feet between Road A and Road C and 200 feet between Road A and Road D?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, number 2 still applies.
Okay. Yeah, I guess the terminology dogleg was a little confusing. I thought that maybe the dogleg was only where the road continued, it wasn't a controlled intersection.
I think, my opinion is that looks like it's just one example of where the center line is less than 200.
Agree, I think we do it separate.
So I think they're separate. So I think you're pulling
We'll just
Just
pull
number
10.
10.
just 10.
Just 10.
All right, we will assume that variance request number 10 was withdrawn, as that drop-off is outside the right-of-way. Brian, can you go back to the master list again? Gotten used to that. We just took care of 10. So we have,
7 seems like it could be unique, and then 5, 9, 11, and 12 are all,
minimum standard centerline curve radii for local streets. There's a few instances where 7 is a potential issue, and where we were just looking is one of them, I believe.
Which is not in the right-of-way.
Well,
Or-
C is in the right-of-way, like, isn't that it? This is right-of-way, is it not?
It is not. It just says public, this says private, this says private right-of-way. I think there's a box around this intersection. Right here, this dashed line.
Okay, I missed that.
So all of the J portion of Road C is private access, is that correct? It's just a,
I didn't hear which.
I'm
road.
sorry, the J shape of Road C.
Yeah,
All of that is just private access, it's not even right-of-way?
correct.
Okay. So there will be private access entering the roundabout at,
Rob, can you show us on, we're talking about variance request number 7, which is the horizontal centerline radius for a local street. It says several proposed roads within the project. Is there any way you can summarize those for us?
Yep. So we have this location right here.
Which
in
we've
our
already sort
easement.
of taken action on.
Yep. And then we have,
Oh, the one up here by the pool.
yeah, but that's a driveway though as well, so I don't
That's
think.
driveway as well?
Yeah, it's a driveway there, it's not a road
Oh,
at
yeah,
the
okay, I see
intersection.
that now.
And then this here, I think these two right here, Rob, because they were tight coming in these, again, just the orientation of this and trying to work around the environmental part of it, that cul-de-sac, those two radiuses that enter and exit there, I believe are under the 100.
Okay. Well, I mean, the
then-
TRC has always required
Yeah.
auto turns. That's going to be my main concern. similar to the variance that we approved previously. So I'm going to make the motion to approve waiver number 7, the horizontal centerline radius for local streets contingent upon auto turn analysis for the design delivery vehicle and fire truck. Second from Dennis. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, so that's 7. Reduction in the, what's number 2?
That's the block length. One
What's
and,
the offsets?
1 and 2 are very similar, I think, yeah.
Are they? Oh, yes, okay, I see what you mean. Yeah, so 1 and 2 are the critical. So is there any way, or is there a similarity between B, C, D, and E for the non-standard street cross-sections? Is there anything that this board, I'm sort of asking the members, that we need to sort of break out and look at separately? Or does the same criteria sort of affect each of those waivers?
Yeah, we can approve it with the understanding that in TRC, we'll take a look at on-street parking over top of public utilities, so we're good.
Okay.
So that would be numbers 5, 9, and 11.
And 12.
5, 9, 11, and 12, which would be the last ones prior to the big ones, which are going to be the 1 and 2, yeah. Because 10 was removed.
If y'all are comfortable with the a variable cross-section, I think it's fine.
I really don't have any issues. I mean, I had a little bit of a question about what was it on one of them? Where they talked about the center landscape planter. I haven't seen any details on that. But again, it's going to be assuming some sort of a protected median, just going to be landscaped. I don't think that's a problem. It's a private right-of-way anyway, so.
I think having the landscape median, it emphasizes that pedestrian-friendly.
Yeah.
The slower speeds, yeah.
That sounds like the beginning of a motion, but I wasn't sure. Maybe.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve adjustments 5, 9, 11, and 12 to allow for non-standard street cross-sections for roads B, C, D, and E due to the layout of the site and wanting to incorporate landscaped medians with variable width cross-sections.
I'll second that. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. So, 1 and 2. I don't know, I kind of find myself caught between design, which maybe it's a good design, maybe it's not a good design. I don't know. But I don't know that that's really our place to sort of regulate. I'm trying to drill down to, like, there's a lot of unknowns associated with a block length that's this short, and those have been talked about and pointed out. And I'm trying to figure out, for me, how much of an issue are we dealing with on those? The queuing, the circulation, what kinds of, we don't know because we haven't seen this done before.
I would add that I actually do think the design does matter for it. I mean, that's why those dimensions were put in place for the technical specs. That's why those dimensions were chosen, is because humans have been building cities for hundreds of years, and we kind of just know what works, right? Dimensions that work for sidewalks, for streets, for parking, for trees, for distances between buildings, kind of all of these things. And that is meant to be kind of the generic culmination of all those. So while I wouldn't press for a 400-foot, block face at all, but I would like to see something much closer to a standard development pattern. I mean, if you think of a city, of a downtown area as like a tartan grid, where you have basically two grids overlaid with each other. One is a boulder grid pattern, which is your primary streets, and then you have a secondary grid pattern, which is in between, which is your alley access or secondary street network. You can apply that to hundreds of cities. And this, the proportions of that are not lining up for me, for the intent of that ordinance.
Yeah, and this is kind of where I'm stuck. I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know that we're going to have enough support for a motion either way. It's like I don't want to just sit here and talk about it for the next half hour and then not really get anywhere. So I'm wondering.
I've got a question. I've got a
Yeah.
question because I'm trying to understand. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, me
Are
too.
there sidewalks all the way around the buildings?
There appears to be. Yes. That's not the issue.
So I don't understand from a walkability standpoint why walking longer around the buildings is preferred to just walking around the short side of a building. And I ask that from a standpoint of somebody's got a handicapped wife, so.
No, it's a good question. It's kind of like you have a successful operation but killed the patient. We've created walkable streets, but it's so dense for vehicle activity that it ceases to be that walkable. Right? You need it's like a balance between the transportation network and the private land, right? And we see that historically for cities. And like I said, these dimensions get dialed in a little bit, and yeah, they get a little crazy. Go to New York, the avenues are 700 feet long, which is way too long. So we know about what works, and we know what doesn't work. And I am suggesting that the reason that this won't work is because it is way too close together.
So you walk down a short block and then you got to cross a street, basically, and then you walk down a short block and you have to cross the street.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even call it a block. I would say you walk, about 60 or so feet, and then
Yeah.
you got to cross the street.
Thank you.
And then you got to.
And I'm just I'm not a designer. That should be obvious, but I'm just putting that on record. But, they have with Alley F, where it's completely closed for vehicular use, it serves more as a pedestrian alley. I'm wondering just if the alleys behind, 2, 8, and 4, if they functioned more in that capacity, would that alleviate some of those concerns where you don't have a lot of vehicles using those? Because I think that's kind of been the argument.
It wouldn't, I don't think. I mean, it would help. I'm not saying that wouldn't be a beneficial move. Ideally, they would be, let's say you couldn't hit, 300 feet between, kind of major streets, whatever. If you get close to that, or if we go back to that tartan grid idea, the distance between that large grid and that small grid, some representative dimension of what that would look like normally, right? And we're talking about half of what it would normally be. And I think that's my concern. Ultimately, at the end of the day, this is for humans. This is for people to stay at, to play, to go to the park, to visit, to live in, to park, to shop in, whatever's going on. This is for people. And we know design isn't an opinion, right? There are like things, steps to this process that we know work and we know doesn't work, and things that we know that don't work. And so I'm suggesting that if, let's say it were a road and an alley on either side, we would, and then take that and overlay it over what we know out there in the real world, what that would be like. And I think it's not hitting the intent of that. Again, walkable, yes. Desirable, I don't think so. I mean, we could walk through a parking lot, right, and say, and that's kind of like if you maximize this condition, right, of just vehicle stuff right by each other. So.
A procedural question, if you don't mind?
Sure.
So this was
Microphone, please.
Yeah, we can see it. You can leave it there and talk about it. I see what you're talking about.
And So this was approved under conditional approval. Our task, because it's conditional approval, is to basically mimic this design as best we can. Otherwise, we got to go back through the city council process. Is that incorrect?
Brian?
That is correct.
So if we're talking about making wholesale changes to road networks, expanding block lengths, then are you suggesting that we need to go back through the city council process on this?
I'm not suggesting any of that. What I'm suggesting is we are here to talk about and discuss and either approve or deny the variances that are put before us, right?
Right, but those variances that you speak of would not be approved in the plan that was already approved. What you're saying would also apply to this plan, which was approved.
That's not this. I mean, that does not, what that is, does not have all of the same issues. Now, I'm not going to speak to the design of that, but that is a very different design than what we're looking at.
Yeah, we went through a design modification to get those changes approved, but what I'm saying is if we were to have to do 400-foot blocks, which this doesn't have 400-foot blocks, then we have to go back through city council. And I'm just trying to get a sense of, like, you know, the ramification of trying to change something because it's not, say, desirable in one person's view, could have a trigger which causes this to have to go back through the city council process because we had to change so many things. I just want to put that out there because that's how I see this possibly going if we're looking at changing road networks.
For a point of clarification, too, I am not suggesting that they have to abide by the 400 feet. What I am saying is, though, that that was the intent of that and why it was put there and how those dimensions came to be. And so getting to as close to that as possible. And now what we seem to be is almost the opposite end of that. I don't know that you could put two streets much closer to that and not have, you know, what's basically more or less a parking lot. And so that's where I'm coming at it with. I mean, the intent of those, of what we're trying to look at for that variance was to reintroduce the street grid, right?
So I heard what you said here, and now I'm going to add this to it. So when you look at a city grid, like you said, you have 400-foot street grids, and you have intermediate, which you would consider an alley. And I think that's what we're looking at here. So the ordinance, or the technical standards, measure everything from center line to center line, so that's what I'll reference in this. So if we're going 200 feet center line to center line, and we're at a 175, if I have to change Road C and call it Alley C, we're the same intent. And that's what we're trying to say here. Road C is not acting the same way as Road A. It's not technically road. I could easily classify that as an alley and justify it because it is back a house. And all it is providing another means for what we're calling more of that grid pattern. And again,
Service.
I'm going to try to talk louder, but when you look at this down here, this initial layout that was there, again, it's a UMX. We're not going for the perfect square 400 by 400 block that we have in the city. That's not what we can do. We're fitting it into an urban area, trying to fit it in to get, you know, to mimic what's down here, to kind of give people that same experience without coming all the way downtown, if that's what they choose. So what I'm trying to say is we don't have the perfect alignment or the perfect 400 block, but we still have that intent. And if Road C and Road D are technically alleys, then we're falling right in that guidance, exactly what you said. If you say to us, you just feel, your opinion is to get close to that. So what I'm saying is if the intermediate block is 200 feet, and we're at 175, I believe we are close to that. I believe we're as close as we're going to get to that, you know, that what I'm going to call is the alley or the back of house road. Again, they're all labeled as roads. It's just very generic at this point. It could easily be an alley because it serves the same purpose. That's exactly what it's doing. And the intent is to not bring people down Road C to give them the experience. That is not it. If people drive down Road C, it's because they think there's a parking space behind it they can go slide into. Outside of that, that's not the experience. So I leave it at that in your decision here because that's what that's our intent here. Road D and Road C are not meant to be, you know, the money is not being spent on those roads per se to enhance those to the level that Road A is. We don't see this as a Road C and a Road A competing with one another, not even close. So in our opinion, it's an alley. And again, this is just terminology at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm just trying to find some sort of middle ground. Is there any way from a circulation, a one-way, using a similar grid like, because I know my concerns is you've got a lot of two-way traffic coming in and out of the Road C-D intersection. In front of the West End service area, I still have some concerns about that, and I'm really just thinking out loud. I'm not even really proposing. Is there anything that can be done that would help, you know, alleviate some of this anybody on the board would? How about making roads D and C one way? I mean, would there be any?
Hesitant to redesign this for them,
Yeah.
right? Like that's not but what I do know is the intent of that is pretty clear. And I'm not saying it's either 65 feet or whatever, however much we have right now versus 400, but something close.
If I might throw this out there too, so we've all a lot of you have been involved in other meetings I've had with Project Race that's going on here. And you look at a project that takes up a city block. Now, this goes from 3rd to 2nd Street. I know I'm referencing another project. And the reason to that is we're viewing 2nd Street as a back of house, right? 2nd Street has on-street parking, 2nd Street has service alley, that's where they're going to service buildings. Like, again, so when we start thinking about this, there's not a perfect scenario where everything's going to line up exactly as it is. When you look at downtown, you work in those parameters, you have defined streets. In our case, Road A is our 3rd street, right? Road C and Road D is our 2nd street. That's the back of house. They still function. They still have people drive down them. They still have on-street parking, but that's where the deliveries come. That's where everything else is going to come in those structures because that's what you do in this type of setting. So what would be wrong is for us to say we're going to stop the truck in Road A and get out and unload it like that. We recognize that's wrong. But in downtown here, you know, they stop on any of the streets because that's the way it's set up. We're trying to at least take the same urban experience and make it a little better, that we feel is better, and get them off onto the back roads or back alleys where they will service. So that's the way I see this. You know, again, I'm sure you have, I don't know what the distance is from 3rd to 2nd. I'm sure it's 300, whatever that distance is downtown. But again, it's the same thing. We're looking at the same exact scenario here. But instead of that, what we've done is we're looking like at the alley effect in the middle. So we're not going to have the magnitude of a 2nd Street there, but it's our back of house, it's our alley. That's what we're going to, you know, trying to designate as the not so popular road.
So, you know, these rows, C and D, those sidewalks aren't pavers, they're colored concrete, they're not as wide, they don't have the amenities. Road A is the amenity. If that helps you to picture these in a different hierarchy of use. You know, I think to summarize what Rob's saying is, you know, one size does not fit all, and that's why we're here. If we were following standards that have been set for hundreds of years, we wouldn't be in front of you asking you to consider this. So the challenge on this board is to be able to see through what would typically be the fallback position and to see the project for what it is. And what it is, it's a nice project. And we are relying on you to be able to kind of see beyond those standards and see the greater vision here. And I think that's what your task is. It's not necessarily to, you know, design things beyond the technical aspects. So that's TRC. I mean, this is, you know, squint your eyes, if you will, you know, 440,000 square foot view. Is this a good project or not? And do the technical standards that we're asking you to give us relief on, based on our proposal here, do they greatly affect, you know, health, safety, welfare, those types of things of projects, or they make the engineering not possible? So I leave it at that because, again, I mean, honestly, if a one size fit all, we wouldn't be here.
So it looks to me like there's 3 things essential to the success of this project called the avenue. 1 is an avenue. 2 are buildings on either side of the avenue. And 3 are places for people to park so that they can enjoy the facilities. And so on the land that you have, to have a avenue and to have buildings and to have parking, it looks like you're constrained as far as getting 400-foot wide blocks. Is that fair enough?
It's a very linear project.
I would be very challenged if somebody told me, go back to the drawing board and make a 400-foot wide block in that width of land.
I'll repeat it again. I am not saying they have to abide by the 400 feet. That is, so on a spectrum of what we could do, it could be 0 to 400 feet. The desired amount is about 400 feet. That's what's in the ordinance. That would be like the gold standard, what we'd want to see. There wasn't a stormwater pond, there wasn't a thing there. Given that they have some site restrictions, we're here to talk about those and try to understand, like, it's not going to be cookie cutter and fall under, you know, exactly as it fits in the ordinance. That's okay. But we need to get closer to that, not farther away from it, right? And we are pretty far away from it right now, is where I'm at with it. And it is challenging, but that's part of what this is. I mean, we're building places for people.
Yeah, I mean, I see justification to approve less than the 400 feet, but this is a departure.
Can we, the site plan here, there's a scale at the bottom of the drawing that is off the screen right here. I was just hoping to see that, and then measured up against.
Do you have a scale by
Well,
chance?
you have a scale right here.
Does anyone have a scale?
So if you back that up so we can look at that in context with kind of the block length we're talking about. So we've got, so basically, if you look at building 4 and 2, and pretend like that road wasn't in between them, that's still not the size of a block, right? If we take a block face, let's take about 300 feet. It's probably more like 200 from end to end. That's what I'm saying. And I actually don't see anything restricting them from achieving this, other than there's more buildings, right? I mean, that's really what's happening. And I think that's going to be, that's not achieving the goal, the intent of that.
Yeah, I mean, the buildings are what make the fabric of the streetscape. So if you want less buildings, then that's less urban. And we're in an urban mixed-use zoning. So I guess I'm having a hard time understanding why you want to make it a less urban project.
Yeah, that's not what's happening, but we don't need to go down this path anymore, but that's
we
not
don't,
what we're
but, I mean,
proposing, that's not what's happening here. What I am saying is simply, there is a 400-foot requirement. We're not even
400-foot
close.
maximum requirement.
Maximum required. We're not even close.
We're at 175.
We're not, I don't think so.
I mean, I just scaled it right here.
You know, I'm looking at it. I mean, where are you going, center line to center line?
Yeah, and that's what the standard actually measures from, it says it's distance between center lines.
And that's okay. So for 400, you know, from center line to center line.
But again, I understand what we're saying, but what I want people to envision here, and I think you, Chad, you've nailed it. I mean, you said it exactly, was the 400 feet is your street network, and not so much of in between that.
I'm sorry, guys. You guys are so too far away from the mics.
Sorry. You know, the 400 foot would be the road, and the 200 foot would be the alley. And again, that's what I think we have to look at it as. So when we look at that goalpost, I think it's 200 feet to the 175, 170, whatever it measures to. It's right in that general area. That's what we're looking at. So I don't think that goalpost is that far off. If we were doing another city block and wrapping buildings around it, or if we had buildings that were facing Road C that were frontages, meaning, you know, commercial, like we were using them as a commercial entity, I would completely understand that. But I think there's justification to show that these roads, Road C and Road D, really do function like that alley and that intermediate street. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to say here. Everything that fronts on, you know, D doesn't have really anything. It's all back of house. And there's not even an entrance to the parking garage there. C, really, that's what you got. You got a parking garage entrance, and that's how you kind of get in that. And that whole building back there is all residential and a parking structure.
It's a one-sided project. I mean, Road A is your project. If we had a wrapped block, like Rob's talking about, if it was front and backs, then I can see 400 feet because you're going to have building, you know, alley building, but we're just building alley. We're not a two-side, we're not a multi-blocked faced project. This is really a one-street project.
I mean, I feel like we're going in circles.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an agreement to disagree at this point, because I think that, you know, what we're trying to do, I think, has been well explained, and what you want is something that is not really possible. So I guess we'll just have you vote on it at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I'd add to that by saying, from my understanding, and there's examples of this that I'm not aware of, by all means, let me know. Usually when we talk about the street grid and that tartan grid and the difference between the major system and the secondary system, traditionally that secondary system of alleys doesn't have parking. It is a throughway, right? Maybe some trash goes back there or something like this. This is not that, right? Whether we name an alley or not, it's a road with on-street parking. And it doesn't have to be the main one, it still is one. And at the end of the day, if we measure what that block face is going to be with that building, we're talking about 60 or so feet from the corner of that building to the other one before you encounter another road, another right-of-way. And I think that's it.
So if we took the parking out, you'd be fine with it?
I'm done. I think I've said enough. I think we're going in circles.
Well, no, you just introduced a new element to the conversation by saying that it seemed as if parking was part of the issue. So if parking were to go away, does that do anything for you?
I'll let them speak to that. I'm going to talk about what's here and vote on what's here.
So, gentlemen, if you don't mind, may I interject just for a moment here, as this seems to be coming to a closure here. So, for the record, my name is Charles Worsham. I'm Senior Vice President of Mixed Use Development with the Carroll Companies, so I'm principal in charge of overseeing this project as we go through entitlement, design, construction, and such. So, appreciate your thoughts, Chad, as you've gone through this, and I guess as I've kind of sat and listened to the various issues that have kind of been brought to the forefront, I guess the one key thing that's really two things. One, just to reiterate what the Paramount team has said, is that as you look at the strip of asphalt behind Building 2, call it alley, road, whatever you want to call it, behind 2 and 4, that is basically these back-of-house service. The only thing facing that way is the loading doors, the trash rooms for Building 4, for Building 2, it is essentially the back-of-house behind those. The avenue, the Road A, is the primary function of this shopping center. So I guess in one way I look at this, we have a parking deck instead of a parking lot behind Building 4. Behind Building 2, we have a parking deck and the courtyard for another building back there instead of a parking lot like you find at the Main Street in Mayfair. There's really no difference in my mind. If we were downtown Wilmington, I can understand this conversation being a much different nature, where we have a building facing three, four sides of the 400 square foot block. This really is a commercial project focused on Road A that has circulation on the back side of it. We have parking decks instead of parking lots. If you really want to boil this down to what its fundamental thing is, it's a hotel at the end of an avenue with flanking street front retail, multifamily, to really create that activated central area for the customer, for the Wilmington population to come and enjoy this. I could have if parking structure number 1 was a parking lot, would we be having the same conversation? Probably not. It's just, if we want to call Road D, Alley D, to fit within the conforms of something within the ordinance, I'll take the pen and mark it right now. That's not a big deal, because that's really all it is the service component for the trucks that will be coming in, servicing the hotel. There's loading zones and those drop-offs. Actually, it's kind of, as you will see when we get into the TRC, behind Building 4, those are actually called loading zones, because we need to have somewhere for the box trucks to park, for if Gap is the mid-tenant in Building number 4, they can unload it and get it in there. It is not intended to be a thoroughfare with street face in it, where we get into an urban environment with four-sided buildings activating it. The last point I want to make, just with respect to the 400-foot dimension, as I read it and been listening back and forth, it's 0 to 400, not to exceed 400. Center line to center line, it sounds like we're about 175-ish, based on what Paramount's coming off with. There is no minimum. 2, we could spend the next 2 hours arguing between 2 and 250. I mean, where does the process end? Because you could say it could be 125, you could say it's 175, you could say 250, and you could say 400. Now I'm saying 220. The subjectivity, to be quite honest with you, I'm not sure how you get to a resolution in a forum like this on it. I think what we've tried to demonstrate, and with the Paramount team, is show that within the intent of the UMX zoning, what we're trying to accomplish here, which was a very dense, very constrained site, create this urban, rich environment that people want to come spend the afternoon shopping, stay at the hotel, come have dinner and such. To be honest with you, I'm not sure the customer that comes and parks in parking structure number 1 at the bottom, comes out, goes, has dinner at the Westin restaurant, and then goes shopping at the Gap in Building 4, is going to know whether it's 175 or 250. I'm just being very candid here. This is a commercial destination. We're not recreating a new town in the middle of the desert. That's going to be the new urbanist planning thing. 0 to 400, I could see 6 different opinions on what that number should be between 0 to 400, because there's really no guidance on it from what I can tell and listening to the discussions here. I just hope you recognize we've really put our best foot forward to create a very unique project, which has created its issues, and trying to make worth the ordinance here. Just goes by the fact that we had 13 variance requests. But I hope you see what we have here is managing a tight site, creating a dense urban feel, urban scale type project that in the end we think is going to be very successful because it's going to be a first-class project. And whether it's 0 or 400, there's 400 numbers in between there that somebody's going to think one of them's right. So I just want to make that comment on it as we move forward.
I appreciate it. I think we've talked around in circles, and you know, I think to our credit, we have approved 11 of the 13 variances. So it's not like we're trying to, you know, put a wall up. You know, we're trying to work with you. It's just, I know from my perspective, there's a lot of unknowns here. You know, we have conflicting turning movements. You know, there's 2 variances left to be considered, and the 200-foot minimum offset distance between center lines on the opposite sides of the street is as much or bigger of an issue from an engineering standpoint, at least from my perspective, than particularly the design. You've got conflicting turning movements in every which way. You've got 2-way alleys, 2-way road A. They all come to a point, and there's no queuing distance between those blocks for those drivers to work that out. It may be fine. Like when you build it, it may be fine. But we don't have a lot of examples, and there's not really been enough here in my mind to justification to sort of try and limit those conflicts. And I'm fine with some sort of conditional approval. I mean, we got to maybe wrap this up and get some sort of emotion on board. But I think that's where we're coming from.
And so, Rob, to that point, I think, and this is, I'll be my first time going through the DAC process here in Wilmington. I understand you have the TRC. It's kind of screwy. It's a little bit cart before the horse, or who knows which one's driving this, because a lot of the stuff we've been talking about here is really us sitting down with the auto turn moments, showing you how it works in a very technical manner. But, you know, it's almost like it really needs to be one bird and one, I mean, all it needs to be rolled into one. So, I mean, if you were to condition number 2, I think, to your point on the turning movements to the TRC and us sitting down and validating this and showing how it works for fire, how the truck movement's going to work and such. I mean, I think that's really the way to accomplish that versus, unfortunately, the way the process is now. I was looking at a 200 scale plan and trying to go through a narrative. That is very much a TRC type issue. That, I mean, we think right now we wouldn't have gotten this far if we didn't think it worked. So unfortunately, it's that TRC that we have to go through to kind of sit down and show those detailed turning movements. I'm just addressing the one point you have there.
Yeah.
So that I'm perfectly fine taking a condition to that effect, so we can sit down, roll up our sleeves, get the bum wad out and sketch it out and show you how it works. Because otherwise, if we didn't think it worked, I wouldn't have invested the time and money we've already done to get to this point in time.
Okay.
So having that, I do appreciate everyone's time this afternoon. I know this has been a lengthy, very in-depth, very robust discussion on this, but I hope, to what Mike and Rob said here, we've really tried to create something special here that's focused on the avenue, which is Road A. The rest is back of house, kind of circulation, allow things to move in and out of the decks. And, to the fact that we worry about the radius and a conflict here or there, to me, that's really a TRC level type discussion that we will be having a very robust discussion as we go through that in the TRC process. So, but thank you again for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
Just listening to all this, and roads, Road D is private. It's not a right-of-way.
No, it's a road, right? It's a right-of-way, isn't it?
It says private. It does not say right-of-way.
Well, Road C is, though.
And that was my question to the applicant. Road C is shown a portion of Road C is shown as private right-of-way.
Those need to be right-of-ways?
But I've heard it mentioned multiple times, the intention of Road C and Road D to be back-of-house offerings, not really the focus of the situation. Would there be, and it sounded like it was almost offered, to change what's on Road C to make it
Yeah, so I'll answer your question, but with a little bit of information to it.
Okay.
So when we went through some of the negotiations with CFPUA on where to have public utilities, where they would accept them in private, that's kind of what drove some of this initially. Initially, CFPUA had wanted us just to put one master meter out here, and that just wasn't going to be feasible for the project and how to do that. So we all sat down and kind of figured out what was the best means where we'd have public right-of-ways. If I'm not mistaken, Road C, either way around it, I think Road C became a public, or a right-of-way in it for that reason, because there was public utilities. Again, this is something we can go back to the drawing board with them on, and with Gary and his staff, and, if we have to provide an easement over it, and if they'll
Yeah, I was
accept
going to
that,
say,
that's
couldn't you
fine.
make it a public
That's what I
utility
mean. So
easement?
Yeah, it
I don't
doesn't
see
have
any-
to be a right-of-way, it can be a public utility
Yeah,
easement, that's fine.
And again, and some of that is some new direction we've had, so we're comfortable with that, and I think that's the reason why some of these initially were even private, public, because we're trying to work through all the different entities and figure this out, so.
So I think in
So I
my
think-
mind, to a lot of Chad's point of, I'm going to use the vague numbers, 400, 200-foot alleys around 200 foot. If we're at, what did y'all come up with, 175 for an alley? I would be more comfortable if Road C were that alley, that back access providing services, back-of-house services, for it to function like that, to be designed like that, to not have the parking, to not invite people back there for some reason, to have the loading zones and all that. Just observation of everything that I've heard. It seems like Road C, and for me, is the hangup because it's listed as right-of-way.
Yeah, I don't see any reason, if it was conditioned along that way to be no right-of-way, I don't think we would have any issues with it, because we could handle all that with easements.
Yeah, I think that
Public
there's a
utility
at least from my perspective, there's a benefit from a fire and delivery standpoint to having an access there. But if that road ends up being, and again, we don't know how this is exactly going to be used by vehicles, but if cars use that on a regular basis to get in and out of the project, you've got a lot of conflicting turning movements with those intersections really close to each other, and we just don't know how that's going to function. There's not a lot of limited, I don't know whether those things need to be one way or whether or what would be the best solution. I'm not a designer. I just know that those are some of the issues. There's part of the reason why we have that standard.
Yep.
And I haven't seen a lot of, I don't know, I don't want to say justification, because you guys clearly have a model in mind of what you want to see, but we haven't, I don't know how that's going to affect the circulation of the site either, so I would be okay with that option,
Redesigning, or,
to eliminate the right-of-way in that area. I don't know that necessarily addresses Chad's primary concern, but I'm trying to find the middle ground here,
But I appreciate what you're saying, but in my mind, though, it's the, ripple effect, whatever it is. So we have all these roads and block faces that have on-street parking and sidewalks, and, presumably they put some street trees in there, and we have this walkable environment. Now we're talking about taking a majority, I wouldn't say a majority, a good portion of those streets and now paring them down to be alleys in order to shoehorn it into the variance. And so we've lost a lot of walkability features, I think, and traffic calming for the sake of this one variance. So it just, I'm not seeing that so much. But by all means, I'm only one person.
You know, between Building 4 and Parking Structure 1, that portion of Road D that says private, I'm envisioning that between Building 2 and Building 6. So essentially just removing the parking, all of the sidewalking would still be there.
Maybe some
Everything-
loading areas, but yeah.
Yeah, leave the loading zones there. That's kind of what I was thinking.
And I missed it. What is Building 6? It's next to Parking Structure 2,
Yes. that's
Building 6 is residential and parking structure.
residential.
And again, I don't know. I do put a little bit of weight in the fact that these are private streets. If this were public, I think we'd have a bigger problem, but I don't know.
I see a bulk of the traffic using Road A and Road B, and the portion of Road D to enter the parking structures. I don't see a lot of traffic necessarily on C and D.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I was agreeing with you that, the C and Ds is going to be basically for, your loading and your deliveries and so forth, but your main thoroughfares for your public access is going to be predominantly A and B is what you had said, and I agree with that.
What is this area, just one more question, sorry, I just noticed this. On the right side by the roundabout, we have an area called out, and below that towards the bottom for future development. So we have space, is what I see. We're not constrained by space here. That's not the problem.
Yeah, are there plans for those areas?
The administratively approved project shows those. This is a phased site plan you're looking at that we're asking for these variances on. If we obviously go to phase 2, we would have to come back with you if we have some more, because we're not doing that, permitting that right now.
It'd be these last two buildings
But
that were
there's,
approved.
yeah,
That's all it is.
those are already been programmed and parked and everything else, so there's no room there per se. It's already been programmed, designed.
Okay.
So I realize it's not directly applicable, but I'm looking at an aerial photo of Mayfair, and when you look at, the main road coming in, heading towards the theater, and then the buildings on either side, I don't think you really have 400 feet around those buildings, and it's just a sea of parking lot. And the nature of this is just something different, and it's better. I don't know how we can make it the best, but it looks like an amenity compared to that existing thing in Mayfair over there. So it's just an observation. I mean, if we I guess you could stretch it long ways, but then it gets to be a challenge because you may not have an avenue anymore.
Sure.
So,
Brian, you bringing something up? Is that what I'm?
And just as the staff would like to point out that the roads, I believe C and D, they're not required to be rights of way. The grid street pattern that's required by the UMX would be satisfied by the north-south B and the east-west A.
Okay. I think we have to take some action, and it either moves forward or it doesn't. I'm going to make the motion that we approve variances 1 and 2, conditional upon, I guess, eliminating right-of-way for Road C. I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this. I would like the TRC to have an in-depth look at the circulation of this and the pedestrian circulation of this. I think one of the things that Chad has spoken to is that if you're walking on that sidewalk, you're now going down, you're crossing another street, you go 75 feet, you go down, you cross another street. Perhaps one of the options is to raise these alleys. I don't know if that works for fire or not, but fire would have an opportunity to discuss that at TRC. But I would encourage the applicant to take Chad's, you know, if this is approved, I would encourage the applicant to take, you know, sort of Chad's discussion to heart. Because I do myself have some concerns about circulation, but not enough in my mind on a private street to vote to deny and, you know, the waiver and redesign the site. So again, my motion is to approve. Condition is removing the right-of-way for C, Road C, but between roads D, B, and E, right? Not sure, is there any other conditions that this committee would feel appropriate in this case, or?
Does that include the removal of parking? Or is
Well,
that
I want to be
subject
clear that I don't
TRC?
mind loading.
Okay. Correct.
I think whatever they can do to discourage regular vehicular traffic is going to go to alleviate the sort of conflicting movements concerns that we've got. So I don't know. I mean, if there's employee parking back there, for example, is that a good place for that? I don't know. I'm not going to go to say eliminating it unless somebody else feels like that's an appropriate condition. I'm going to leave that off then. So that's my motion.
Second.
Second by Gary. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
4 to 1. Okay. So that, just to be clear, that was, I believe the discussion was for variances 1 and 2. Okay. So that was in batch because they're both very similar. So I guess the last order of business is to review the preliminary plan. I would ask that if there is any motion that we make sure to apply the standard conditions that staff has recommended for approval. I would look for someone else to make a motion, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the preliminary plan. Is that, yeah, the preliminary design with the justifications, with the conditions of staff in the staff report, and with the justification that the site has some geographic and natural constraints and their intent is to develop a grid-style structure, which is satisfied with roads A and road B. And what's labeled as roads C and D would be functionally used as back-of-house services.
I will second that. All in favor of approving the preliminary plan with the conditions identified by staff, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
4-1. Okay. I believe that concludes our business on this issue.
Yes, sir.
We are adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.